banter, do the thing. And we're officially live.
Hey.
I can't believe we managed 2 of these. I can't believe we managed 1 of these. I feel like Razor Cake is so like print heavy that it sometimes causes us to lag when it comes to technology.
Oh yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. We showed up late, but we're going to do it right. We're prepared.
So how's everybody doing today? Even though we technically already had this conversation.
Yeah, doing pretty great. I mean,
can't complain.
Not too hot today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still alive.
Yeah, that's the big bonus, right?
Oh, we already have so many friends here. Will wanted me to ask Kayla how he tried arriving early.
Yeah, he was a whole week early. He texted me last week around this time saying, "Did I click the wrong link? What am I doing wrong?" I was like, "You forgot to wait 7 days."
Yeah. You were born ready.
Chris frozen.
Yeah. Can aging punks figure out the internet? Generally, no.
But we're doing it. I think Chris may be frozen.
Am I frozen?
No, I can see you just fine.
Okay, maybe it's just my screen then.
Well, there's going to be a lot of that. This is just... Okay. By the way, Kurt wanted to mention that your hair looks really sharp, Kevin.
Oh, thank you so much.
It does.
Look at you, silver fox.
Thanks.
Well,
I'm done.
Kevin, you are not true. You're first up.
Oh shit.
So, to kick things off, bios. Kevin Dunn is a writer, researcher, and cultural producer. Active in DIY punk scene since the early 80s. He continues to perform in several bands, runs an independent record label, produces the K-Punk podcast, which is really good. You should check it out. Publishes various zines, and owns and operates a modest recording studio and rehearsal space in the Finger Lakes region of New York. He gets a paycheck for being a professor at a small liberal arts college. He's the author of numerous books, including Global Punk, Resistance and Rebellion in Everyday Life, and the textbook Inside African Politics. He has been contributing to Razor Cake for well over a decade, with numerous interviews as well as 4 One Punk's guides, the most recent on climate change, which is super depressing. He also thinks that Donna, Mike, Kayla, and Chris are 4 of the raddest people he knows and is stoked to be in their company, even virtually.
Yeah. So psyched.
I agree with you, Kevin. I agree.
So psyched.
All right, take it away.
All right. I'm going to actually read a nonfiction piece. It's a piece that's in, I just froze, so hopefully I'm still going.
You're still going.
Okay, good. It's a piece that's in work. It draws from my Global Punk book and also is based on some research I did in Northern Ireland, one of which is an interview that showed up in Razor Cake 112 about the Outcast. So it's called How Punk Rock Saved Belfast. In early 2019, I walked into the Ulster Museum, located near the campus of Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I was visiting the museum's exhibition on the Troubles, the era of political violence that defined every aspect of life in Northern Ireland from the late 1960s until the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 established a precarious peace. The Troubles were a time of assassinations, bombings, random terrorism, police surveillance, and armed repression involving the British Army, the police, and competing Republican and Unionist paramilitary forces. Entering the multi-room exhibition with its almost 4 decades of Troubles-related artifacts, I could not help but notice the mannequin displayed in the center of the first room, as if occupying the pride of place. The mannequin was dressed in a spiked black leather jacket with Outcast hand-painted on the back. There it is. The accompanying card read, "The Outcast are a Belfast-based punk band formed in 1977. This outfit belongs to Greg Cowan, lead vocalist." Now, one might well ask why a punk's jacket is in the middle of an exhibit on the Troubles. But Northern Ireland's punk scene was both a product and a response to the crippling violence that characterized everyday life for the population, especially the youth. Moreover, a discussion of the peace process that fails to take into account the punk scenes and their activism is woefully inadequate. As this essay will show, the punk scenes of Northern Ireland, particularly in Belfast, created important non-sectarian spaces in which social networks were built, alternative ways of being were imagined, and campaigns of political and social activism were realized, helping to make the peace process a reality. Yet there's a danger in constructing too neat a narrative of punk's role in creating an alternative Ulster. The inclusion of Greg Cowan's Outcast jacket into the Ulster Museum is merely one part of a mythologizing of punk's impact during the Troubles. A dominant tale has emerged in the past few years that credits punk with creating a progressive, peaceful subculture that transformed Northern Ireland. I refer to this as the good vibrations narrative because it tends to center on the role of Terry Hooley, his record store Good Vibrations, and the record label of the same name that he ran, and the punk shows he helped to organize at the Harp in the Belfast city centre. Elements of this narrative were already present in 1979's documentary Shell Shock Rock by John T. Davies, and have become even more pronounced since the 2012 feature film Good Vibrations and its related theatrical show of the same name, both of which are based loosely on Hooley's autobiography. And I myself have contributed to perpetuating this story in my work, Global Punk. The problem isn't that this narrative is a lie. In fact, there's a great deal of truth in the story of punk's transformative power. Rather, the Good Vibration story is too simplistic and incomplete. Simplistic because it ignores the contradictions and complexities of the time. Incomplete because it focuses exclusively on that first wave of punk while ignoring the more politically relevant punk scenes of the 1980s and 90s. So this essay examines the political impact of the Belfast punk scene while correcting the flaws of the Good Vibrations myth. So I'm just going to skip a little bit. I'm going to read you a section here called Punk Comes to Belfast, which just talks about the emergence of the Belfast punk scenes. Pete C. Burns, who would later play in Stalag 17 and help run the Warzone Collective, recalls sitting in his Belfast childhood home listening to the weekly chart countdown on BBC Radio. But then one day, the announcer refused to utter the title of a song rocketing up the charts. It was May 1977. The UK was preparing for the Queen's Jubilee, and the song was called God Save the Queen. But BBC wouldn't play it on the radio, and several publications simply inserted blank spaces when they reproduced the chart. The band, of course, was the Sex Pistols, and Pete wanted to hear the song. The next day, he headed downtown, probably to Caroline Records, and bought the controversial single. Getting home, he put it on the turntable, and his world suddenly shifted. The power of the music was overwhelming. Oh, fuck. I'm not doing any accents here, by the way. Oh, fuck, he thought. The singer, Johnny Rotten, pronounced the H in H-bomb like the working class Irish kid that he was. And Pete felt an immediate kinship. Having been brought up in an Irish Republican household, he related to the anger emanating from his speakers. It was, as he would put later, quote, one culture of resistance speaking to another. Similar transformations were taking place across Northern Ireland. In his own Belfast bedroom, a teenager named Brian Young discovered the Ramones. Previously steeped in a love of glam rock, Brian and the band had recently started, the band that he had recently started now realized that they could write their own songs. As a result, Rudy became one of Belfast's first punk bands. And across town, the Cowan brothers, Martin, Colin, and Greg, heard the Sex Pistols, looked at each other and said, oh, fuck, that's just the greatest thing ever. We can do that. They didn't have instruments or the ability to play them yet, but they set out to form a band, eventually naming themselves the Outcasts because they were banned from venues solely because of the way they looked. Across Northern Ireland, youths who had never identified with popular music suddenly felt personal connections to punk. Kids who hadn't thought they could make their own music or their own art were now inspired to become their own cultural producers. and already existing bands transformed themselves into punks overnight, as was the case of metal rockers Highway Star, named after a Deep Purple song, who reinvented themselves as Stiff Little Fingers. But given the social and physical divides created by the Troubles, these individuals tended to remain isolated. Across Northern Ireland and Belfast in particular, Catholics and Protestants stayed in their own neighborhoods. For Pizzi, going downtown to buy that record required a 20-minute walk across hostile territory and down Victoria Street, which was policed by the infamous Shankhill Butchers. At night, the Army and police completely sealed the city center with security barriers. Crossing social and geographical boundaries was an extremely risky affair. Many observers credit the creation of the actual Belfast punk scene to the Clash's October 1977 concert there. But the Clash actually never played. The show was canceled, and the disappointed fans decided to physically express their frustrations, which triggered a violent police response. ACAB. The ensuing kerfuffle became known as the Riot of Bedford Street, and Rudy would immortalize the event with their song Cops, which contained the opening refrain, SSRUC, SSRUC. Martin McClune, a professor of media studies, wrote, quote, "On that night, the individual punks of Belfast coalesced into a scene, and many of the bands that would emerge in the next few months could trace their genesis back to those events," end quote. It's a good story, but it's not entirely correct. The Clash weren't the first punks to play in Belfast, and there were already several local punk bands in existence before the Riot of Bedford Street. They just hadn't met each other yet. All right, I'll stop there. There's lots more.
I have to unmute myself.
So good.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was excellent.
I have
Thanks.
been to that museum in Belfast, and I've seen these things, and can say from even 5 years ago, firsthand experience, that's still very much affecting Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
could listen to you talk about that for another hour.
Yeah, and it's really weird how the city of Belfast is now embracing their kind of this punk, this sanitized and very specific punk heritage as a tourist destination. They're putting up a mural now of all these punks. There's plaques near the harp and stuff. But they totally ignore the whole 80s and 90s anarchist war zone collective where the real work got done, which is it's pretty interesting. But yeah, still an interesting place. And one of the best accents in the world, which I just will refuse to do.
Fair enough.
It's just a wee accent.
Everybody's clapping for you in the chat. If that, just so you know.
Thank you.
And I heard you had something in your throat. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Just
I
want
was
to
a little
check.
worried.
Yeah.
1312. You all right?
ACAB. Someone posted how many times we were going to reference ACAB, so I figured I'd be the first to jump in there.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Fuck 12. Fuck 12. All right. Kayla, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, Kayla Greet is fucking phenomenal. She's been an active member of the Razor Cake family for over 6 years now. She lives in Seattle, Washington, where she also writes for and produces the zine Skill Shop with other pinball-obsessed friends. For a number of years, she was a music writer for New Noise magazine and is a current reviewer for Maximum Rock and Roll. Her work has also appeared in the book Drop Target Omnibus, wherein she dreams up what a Carmen Sandiego pinball machine would look like. Recently, she was part of a short documentary about the women's pinball tournament and community she helped build in Seattle called Babes in Pinland. She co-hosts the Skill Shop Pincast, interviewing the likes of Andrew W.K., Ed Robertson of Bare Naked Ladies, and former NBA player Todd McCulloch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know shit about the NBA. Sorry, everybody. Kayla works as a special education kindergarten teacher, has visited 10 countries, and misses high fives, hugs, and live music the most in quarantine times.
Thank you, Donna. So I'm going to read from this zine that I put out 7 years ago. Let me see. I'm going to click on myself here so I can see what I'm looking at. Anyways, this is from when I took a friend on tour, and we had a great time until my car broke down, and then we got stuck in a very like con man territory where we got hustled. Okay. In late November 2012, I took my friend Jesse Marquez, a punk rock rapper, to the Bay Area from Seattle to play some shows. We had a great time there. Unfortunately, on the way back, we broke down and got involved in something much bigger than a mechanical failure. This zine is meant to be a cautionary tale for bands on West Coast tours, those on road trips, or anyone in general who ever finds themselves in an extremely situation controlled by opportunists. Frankly, I was taken for a ride in a car that wasn't running by people who were totally set on taking advantage of me. We were supposed to be gone for just 5 days, which turned into 6 with the car breaking down. From Seattle, I picked up Ryan, a friend of a friend who was moving to Sacramento. We got to Portland to pick up Jesse, aka Juicy, on a rideshare person from the Basque Country named Inyout, who had responded to our Craigslist ad. By 6 p.m., the car was full and we were on our way to the Bay. Ryan was moving on a complete whim and had no idea what to expect. Inyout was 24 and visiting the States for the very first time. Hesitant of his English skills, he remained quiet for most of the ride. We finally were able to pull him out of his shell to learn he not only was an audio engineer in Europe, but played in punk bands and had a love for punk and hardcore. He had been staying with friends in Portland when he thought he should explore more of the West Coast. His sights were set on San Francisco, so when he came across our ad, he figured he'd found a good match. The Craigslist ad was an effort to offset some of the travel costs since Juicy only had 2 shows in the Bay. We tried booking a few more gigs to help fund gas all the way down, but nothing was available. Josie was having a hard time finding the right person to carpool on our trip. Many people finding other rides without telling him or not willing to pitch in for gas. One of them was a documentary filmmaker whose subject was the strife of living on the streets. While he gloated about his fame and accolades in the cinematic world, he threw a fit and guilt-tripped us when we told him that $10 wasn't enough to take him to the Bay Area. By not taking him on a 12-hour journey to see his family for Thanksgiving, we were labeled bigots who were insensitive to the plight of the lower class, and God would respond accordingly, he told us. If I were a theistic person, I may credit him to our epic misfortune. However, I'm merely a non-believer who came across a shitty situation. We got into Oakland around 6 a.m. Thanksgiving morning and stayed at a friend's house who was in Sacramento for the holiday, so we had the place to ourselves for the morning. We got a few hours of rest and woke up to tamales and sunny weather with our friend Tim's roommates. And Yout, who had been fairly quiet the whole trip, totally came alive with our new friends who were fluent Spanish speakers. I did my best to keep up, but soon into the conversation, I was no longer able to respond, so I listened and picked up a few words here and there, but mostly focused on the hat I was knitting. Turns out that Inyout's old band, Citizen Kane, had played a few gigs with these people in Europe. And these are the moments that I live for, like the fact that 6 complete strangers from Seattle, Oakland, Basque Country, Germany, Spain, and Mexico all sat in a backyard and can find common ground linking them to the same place through music. Later that day, we met up with Jesse, who'd been staying at a friend's house a few blocks away. The 3 of us headed off to San Francisco, where we met up with local DJ and musician Amy Lawless for her radio show, Cold Ones and Rolled Ones. And Yout and I sat on the couch with some Thanksgiving leftovers while Amy and Jesse got set up for the show. When she went on air, I got to be a part of the show for a bit, which I was both surprised and excited by. A member of Batter Vogu from Oakland came by for the second half of the show and talked about their upcoming gigs they were doing with Juicy Carcass and Wilt from Seattle. While driving through the city, Inyout told us, "You might be surprised, but these are the tallest buildings I've ever seen." He then spent Thanksgiving evening in a hostel in San Francisco and explored the city by bicycle the next day, while Jesse and I spent time with different friends in the Bay. In San Francisco, the show was tucked away in an alleyway downtown. The entrance was through the garage and opened inwards directly into the stage. I found this out after returning from a mission to find coffee during the first band. When I tried opening the door, there was resistance and then a few inches of clearance from which I was grabbed and tossed inside, right next to Wilt's guitar player. Even though it's probably in the most uncomfortable spot in the whole place, I had a great view of the crowd who was absolutely stoked on the band. At one point, I saw Inyout get so excited that he picked up their singer. In between bands, I smoked nervously and sipped coffee, feeling completely out of place. There were a few people that I recognized, but I didn't know very well and wasn't socially lubricated enough to converse with them. Then I remembered there was someone there who felt even more out of place than me. And Yout and I talked for a long time about music and compared our punk scenes to the ones we were witnessing. His English is a lot better than he gives himself credit for, and we were able to understand each other just fine. I was very happy he decided to come along with us on this trip. Saturday night found us in another garage venue, this time in West Oakland at the Born Dead House. Round two was much more fun for me, and I ran into a lot of people I hadn't seen in a while. Jesse ended up not being able to play the house show with Will and Better Vogu that night because it was getting too late. Somewhere around 2 a.m., the show got broken up and people were sent on their way. And Yout and I went to the car to wait and sleep while Jesse rocked an impromptu house party around the corner. Another hour or so later, Jesse drove us to the house we were all crashing in. There was still a little bit of party left in this crowd, since everyone who lived there had been at the Born Dead House show, including a fair-sized group who didn't live there. Fortunately, I had a friend at this house who let me sleep in their bed, knowing I had a long day of driving ahead of me and needed the rest. The following morning, we slowly got started on our day, packed up our things, said our goodbyes, thank yous, and I'll miss yous, and then met some friends for a much-needed breakfast. Exhausted with at least a 12-hour drive ahead of us, we hit the road around 11. Jesse took the first shift, and we stopped in Yolo, California for lunch and ice cream. And that was the last fun thing that we did. Now here's where the story starts to get shitty. Around 5 p.m., we were driving through Northern California where the roads are all curves and high uphill grades. I was attempting to sleep when I could hear the car whining about the pass and was about to tell Jesse, throw it in a lower gear and to give it more power when it started making a sputtering sound. We pulled over immediately and it started smoking. I called a mechanic friend who tried to help as much as he could over the phone. The car had overheated, so we had to wait 20 to 30 minutes and then tried to start it again, which resulted in turning over, but then making a scary noise. We shut it off and waited for my insurance to send a tow truck. We only had 3 mechanics to choose from in Mount Shasta, so I told my insurance to take us to the closest one, knowing full well that all 3 would be closed at this time on a Sunday. Once we were able to talk to the tow truck driver, we found out that there was only one auto shop in town anywhere near a hotel. The driver warned us that the alternate shop had a lot of broken down beaters in his yard, but since it was going to be around 30 degrees that night, we opted for not sleeping in the car. Freeze all night or take a risk with a disreputable shop were our only options. Once we got to the shop on the other side of town, and Yout went into the Alpine Lodge, which was not fancy by any means, to find out what they charged. The desk clerk sent him back to us with the price of $75 per guest. Outrageous. Our tow truck driver went in to try to talk them down on the rate, but returned defeated. They're not going to budge on the room price, he said. So we gave the concierge the impression that the room was only for Yout, and he then let us know what room he was assigned to and snuck us in one by one. Having slept in a bed each night of our trip, I gave the cushy queen size to the boys and curled up on the floor with my sleeping bag and pillow. This 25-hour mechanic next door was not only not there, but had no hours posted. The phone number was on the outside the shop, had the wrong area code, and when I tried the correct one, it was disconnected. I had called out for my shift the next day and started to really worry at this point. So I wandered around the neighborhood hoping to run into someone who could give me more information. Half a block away, I happened upon a middle-aged couple who was just returning home from grocery shopping. I managed not to totally freak them out by approaching them from the darkness and asked if they knew anything about the auto shop. They told me they didn't know if Gary lived nearby, but he's usually in the shop around 9 a.m., so look for him then. I got up close to 8 a.m. the next morning, took a shower, risked some auxiliary car power to charge my phone, and then met Jesse at Seven Suns, a new age cafe across the street, to wait for this 25-hour mechanic to show up. At 9 a.m., I called my insurance and requested a tow to the shop we were originally going to. Our tow truck driver the night before had not updated his paperwork, so my insurance thought that we were at the place I was requesting and wouldn't re-tow us unless that shop couldn't fix the problem. As I was trying to explain the absurdity of asking for a tow to somewhere we already were, Gary, the mechanic, showed up. There was another guy there who had hit a deer the night before and needed some major work done, so I got to Gary as soon as he parked his truck. What followed were more signs that we were dealing with an incompetent shop owner. He was out of work orders, so he jotted my info down on a scrap of paper. I then reminded him he might want my phone number. There were so many beater cars in the yard, there was no way to get mine into the garage, so he said he would have to look at it from the side of the road. Gary said to take a walk, and though he only had 20 minutes left on his prepaid cell phone, he would call when he knew what was wrong. And Yout checked out of the hotel, and we all walked to a diner where Jesse impressed the waitstaff by finishing off a stack of pancakes. In the years I've worked here, I've never seen anyone finish that, our host exclaimed. As I flipped through the Christian Times, the only free paper there, and Yout added honey to his glass of milk. That's very biblical of you, Jesse commented. Our small town servers were also enamored with this. And Yout smiled, looked at us, and asked, "What? Is this illegal?" With our only good laugh since the car broke down, we walked back to the shop and past the Fuck It Cafe. As Jesse and I chuckled, shrugged, and agreed it was a fuck it kind of day, and Yout enlightened us on how nice of an area of Thailand that is. So from there, things get like very stressful, so I'll leave you here.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Oh,
And I carved out the stamp for these, did the art, what's not.
Oh,
And
cool.
I have them without covers, but if anyone wants to know the rest of the story, I have 10 copies available.
and how would they get a hold of you?
Oh, okay. KAYLUH@gmail.com. I'll put it in the YouTube chat here.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah, that started to give me, like, as soon as you're like, oh, now things get shitty, and I'm like, no, we've all had one of these. I don't,
Yeah.
like, don't let it be Nazis.
It wasn't Nazis, but it was a car ring. It definitely was a car ring of the hotel to the auto shop to the restaurant that we got driven to, and then a $450 ride from Mount Shasta to Portland. I don't know if you've checked lately, but a Greyhound is about $80.
Oof.
Ouch.
Yeah, man.
Oh, that's brutal. Well, I'm glad you survived.
Yeah, survived. And CJ from Big Eyes took me down to get my car. We got it back. Things worked out, but in the middle, there's some scary moments and some shitty.
Okay, Lee, you kind of froze. Oh no, you're back. Okay.
Oh, hi, I'm back.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, thanks for
CJ's a hero. I can vouch that. You haven't met him? He's a hero. All right, Mike, you ready? You're
Yes,
next.
Oh, I might be joined by Spippy. She just came downstairs, so we'll see if that happens or not.
Oh, I want Spippy.
It's almost food o'clock, so we'll see how it goes.
Always food o'clock.
Yeah, right.
All right. So Mike T. Fournier. Did I say that right? I've never asked.
Yeah.
Fournier is the author of the novels Swing State and Hidden Wheel, both released by Three Rooms Press, and Double Nickels on the Dime, the 45th installment of Bloomsbury's 33 and a Third series. It's excellent. You should purchase it. He's the publisher and fiction editor of the literary broadsheet Cabildo Quarterly.
There you go.
Thanks, Theo. And co-edits the baseball fanzine Zisk. Fournier lives on Cape Cod with his wife, Rebecca, and 2 cats. Hopefully one makes an appearance.
Maybe both.
He has written for Razor Cake since 2013.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for checking out the second Razor Cake live transmission. This is stuff from my new novel, which is called The Impasse, which I started working on in 2018, started revising in February. What you need to know going into this scene is that the cool older woman at the record store is named D-. She's in a band. Neither of the 2 protagonists in this scene, Jeff or Alice, know which band she's in, but she gave them the flyer. So they went to the show at the VFW, which they're waiting to attend. So that's where we pick up right now in chapter 32. So I'll be back at 11 unless I hear differently, Alice's mom said. Alice said thanks and got out of the car. Jeff remained in the back seat, staring out the window at the throng outside the VFW. He didn't know where to look first. Gravity-defying hair, torn-up clothes held together with safety pins, combat boots, slogans scrawled on army and leather jackets, anarchy burger, bad policy, best before 1984. Jeff got out and walked to Alice a few steps away as the car exited. We're early, Alice said. Let's go over there, Jeff said, pointing to the VFW's brick exterior wall. We can sit and wait and watch people. Alice said, okay. Jeff led the way past two guys with tall, spiky green mohawks and leather jackets. Jeff held his breath as he passed, waiting for them to say something to him and Alice. They looked weird. They looked mean, but no one said anything. Alice leaned back against the wall and sat with her jeaned knees up. Jeff sat and crossed his legs. Most of the time, especially when he wasn't with Alice, he thought of himself as being alone, but he looked at all the mohawks and slogans and unnatural hair colors. A guy not much older than Jeff and Alice swung the drab metal front door open. He carried a gray folding chair under one arm and a metal box under the other. The guy called out, "Bands start in 15 minutes, $3. Pairs and threes and small groups lined up at the door. Jeff said, "Where did everybody come from?" "Everyone waited in little clumps," Alice said, "like us, but together it's a lot of people. We're a lot of people, especially in a small place." "No, like, where are all these people from? Where are they every day?" "Everywhere," Alice said, "every town." Jeff imagined all of them in their houses, standing in front of mirrors, getting their mohawks just right. "You want to get in line?" Alice nodded. He stood, held out a hand to Alice. She pulled herself up. Her hand felt much warmer than Jeff thought it would, softer. Inside, the VFW's cinder block walls were painted the same dull green as a classroom, but there was no mistaking the dimly lit space for a school. A moose head with antlers big like television antenna adorned a wall facing a curiously empty space across the way, just one of many dead animals looking down on the evening. Wall hangings bedecked the room, wooden plaques bearing individual bronze plates engraved with names of past officers, tournament winners, photos of shirtless men grinning and hoisting beers towards the camera, posed headshots of men who hadn't come back from their wars. Jeff wondered if his dad had ever been there, whether he pulled his truck over on lonely Pennsylvania roads and stopped at such places, falling into easy conversation with men who understood some of the things he'd been through. Wordless music that sounded like trees groaning in a strong wind played over unseen speakers. He must have lost track of Alice as he wandered the building's perimeter, trying to take in all the names, the grins, the camping trips, and trophies. A tug on his sleeve. "You have to see this," Alice said. Jeff turned and followed her from the back of the room into the mass of people. She was at least a head shorter than him on a normal day, but the enormity of her show hair made it easy to see as she sidestepped and nudged and pushed through the surprisingly dense crowd, leading him to the opposite side of the room. "Check it out," Alice said when they stopped. "Check what out?" "Look how low it is," she said, gesturing past a few people in their way. Jeff looked down to where Alice pointed and realized the moose's gaze fixed on the stage. The setup wasn't what he expected. He thought the musicians would be feet above them, maybe yards. Instead, they'd be elevated to the height of a single stair tread. Speakers sat elevated on either side of the stage. Stacks of black equipment crowded the back wall with a drum set in the center. "We'll be so close," Alice said. A normal-looking guy, a few years older than he and Alice, pushed up and past. He began placing cymbals on empty stands. "I think they're starting soon," Alice said. "Which band is this?" "I don't know." Another guy, older and more sinister looking than the first, stepped onto the opposite side and plugged a huge guitar into one of the black cabinets in the back. He pulled the amplifier closer to the lip of the crowd and slung the guitar strap over one shoulder. He hit a note which sounded like thunder. Jeff felt it in his stomach like a punch. "Bass," Alice said, "my favorite." A tap on Jeff's shoulder. He turned to see Dee from the record store. She looked different than when she worked. She wore goth makeup like Alice, and she had her hair done huge. "Excuse me," she said. "Dee," he said, "I'm Jeff from the record store." She smiled, but he could tell she didn't remember him. "You said I was sophisticated." "Of course you are," she half yelled, smiling. "And this is my friend Alice," Jeff said. "Alice," she said, "I'm Dee." Alice opened her mouth, but no words came out. "We're about to play," Dee said. "I need to get on stage." "Okay," Jeff said, stepping to the side. "Good luck." "Nice to meet you, Alice," Dee said, stepping past onto the stage. Alice turned to Jeff. That's her. Jeff nodded. She talked to us, to me. Jeff couldn't help but grin. The Impasse is playing first. Jeff nodded again as Dee set up keyboard on a folding stand. The drummer began thumping out beats on his kit. The sinister bass player played a line on top. They repeated the figure once, twice. Jeff couldn't look away. The bass and drums were so loud, he wouldn't have known Dee was playing if he hadn't seen her thrust her fingers against the keys. She retreated to an amp, her back to the audience, and returned a moment later with a louder keyboard sound. She placed a microphone on a stand in front of her keyboard. The sinister bassist did the same. Check, check, she said, check, hey, hey, from somewhere in the crowd. Keyboards aren't punk. Dee smiled and said into the mic, keyboards aren't punk? Tell that to Tamada Duplenty, you asshole. Cheers from the crowd. Jeff looked at Alice, who shrugged. Good evening, Dee said. We're the Impasse. Thanks for coming early to see us. We have shirts in the back. The bass player thudded out a line that approximated the sound of a helicopter lifting off, while the drummer behind echoed the sound on his kit. Dee's keyboard cut through the din. She began to intone words into the microphone. Jeff tried to focus on what Dee was saying, but he found himself instinctively covering his head as something blurred past. He looked around and saw everyone turned from the stage facing backwards. A blow struck his shoulder. He covered his head as everyone reached upwards. The blur he saw had been a person who somehow launched atop the crowd from the tiny stage. Everyone held the person up, passed them around as they triumphantly flailed. After a few seconds of astonishment, Jeff turned to Alice to ask her about it and noticed that she was no longer next to him because the person surfing atop the audience was her. The blur had been Alice, who gestured and emoted along with the music, held aloft by a sea of hands. She beamed. There you go.
That's awesome.
I want to hang out with Alice. She
Alice
sounds really cool.
Those guys, like, they both watch The Day After on television. You know, everyone gets vaporized by atomic bombs on national television on the Sunday before Thanksgiving in 1983. And so they both start having nightmares, and the same nightmare, actually. And Alice, who is a dungeon master, tries to create her own game to sort of gain control over the post-apocalyptic thing that she sees coming. Except the game that she invents, like, everybody just dies all the time. So she keeps, like, fudging the numbers, and everyone just keeps dying all the time. So there you go.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
This is one of the few times I've gone to a reading and someone read, like, a work of fiction. Maybe I need to go to more readings.
Yeah, I think Chris is going to up the ante next.
Well, I'm going to read some fiction. I can't speak on the ante.
All right. So, Chris, you're the last one. You're closing us out. Headliner.
Woo.
All right. Chris L. Terry is the author of the novels Black Card and Zero Fade. His work has appeared on the Best of the Year list by NPR, Kirkus Reviews, and Slate. He's been writing for Razorcake since 2006. Terry was born in 1979 to an African-American father and an Irish-American mother. He spent his late teens and early 20s touring the US and Europe as the singer for different Richmond, Virginia-based punk bands. These days, Terry and his family live in Los Angeles, where he teaches creative writing.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So I'm going to read from my novel Black Card. Black Card is set in Richmond, Virginia. It's about a mixed-race punk rock musician who has a black imaginary friend who takes away his black card. He has an actual black card which symbolizes his credibility as a black person. And in the book, he goes on a mission to win it back. So I wanted to start with just a small section that talks about Richmond a little bit. Richmond's been in the news because it was the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War, and the city is full of statues of famous Confederates. It really glorifies what I consider to be a very shameful and oppressive history. Those statues have started coming down, and I think that's a symbolic win, and I'm hoping that there's some more tangible stuff that comes from it too. You know, that they rethink, defund, abolish their police department, and just generally reconsider the way that business is done in Virginia. So here's a little teeny section where I make fun of Richmond. There are only first impressions in Richmond. No one calls the Italian place at Strawberry and Maine Burnetti's. They call it the Old Vibe Cafe because that's the business that used to be there. And no one eats at the Old Vibe Cafe because meals cost more than $10. That new thing in an old building line of thought applies to people as well. So I'm sure that someone would call me the old punk rock coffee shop guy if I went out and really tried to do black stuff, going to a nightclub at Broad and Harrison on Friday nights, wearing baggy jeans, whatever. If the city is full of flags supporting an army that lost over a century ago, it's not going to forget who you were last year. So as the narrator, he's trying to figure out what to do next. He's still active in the punk scene. And here he is at a house show. He was up the entire night before, and he's been drinking, and he's going to drink some more. But right now, he's kind of in the middle of things and feeling apart from things, having an alone in the crowd feeling. The first band were all 20-ish with long hair, proud of their van, just back from that first short tour down the coast. Their music better than I wanted to admit. They'd set up to play in a bedroom at the back of a first floor. I wedged behind the chest-high bass amp, nodded to the drummer, and the band roared to life without a hello to the crowd. Sweat flew as fuzzed-out guitars and thick snare hits ricocheted off the close walls. The handful of people crammed up front, transplants from a year or two ago who I never got to know, became an undulating blob of black t-shirts and silver beer cans. When I set my empty on the windowsill behind me, I saw a pile of faces watching through the glass, and the hot room became a limbo. Each face was a blank that I couldn't fill in. I felt like I was chasing a train. We knew the last song was the last song because it started with a dramatic build of bass and drums. The topless, teenage, skinny singer boy pogoed to the beat with a mic cord for a tail, and I jumped too, joining the crowd's "Go, go, go" chant. The old house's sodden floor buckled with each leap until the guitar elbowed its way in and everybody landed with their arms waving. This was the release that I'd wanted, but in that realization, I whisked myself back out of the moment and frowned at my hands, clapping stupidly in front of me. Screaming the last verse, the singer appeared at my side, sea lion slick when he brushed my arm and threw open the window. The people on the back porch stepped back, raising beers in appreciation. The singer dove over the sill and onto the porch, kicking the bass amp. I clamped my hands onto the top of the amp to steady it, and by the time I turned back, he was the flash of sweat-shiny back in the dusk, dragging the mic cord into the dark as displaced shouts exploded from the PA speaker to my left. The song ended with a crash of cymbals, the mic cord draped over the drum set like caution tape. Through the applause, the room's heat shifted from electric to oppressive. I said, "Nice show," to the bassist, and he smiled as I slipped out from behind the amp. The wall was wet to the touch. My head was a grinding gear, waiting to catch a cog. I stepped onto the back deck, 20 degrees cooler, but still hot. Multiply the front row by 5. That's how many people were standing in the grass below me, blowing cheap smokes over warm beer, the dark yard a ballet of glowing red dots. Beyond was Jackson Ward, a black neighborhood that was nicknamed the Harlem of the South during the Jazz Age. Its wide streets are lined with beautiful brick row houses and ornate wrought iron porches, salvaged when the city burned at the end of the Civil War. My father was born blocks from the show, and whenever I went to the neighborhood, I'd look at the street corners and imagine him, younger, standing there with a hokey old rhythm and blues song in his head. But I'd always felt disconnected from the place. It didn't feel right that my only reason for being in a black neighborhood was to hang out with white people. Thank you.
Awesome.
So good.
God
Yeah.
damn.
It's
That's
really
a
an
great
awesome
book,
book.
Chris.
Got it from my public library.
Thanks, Kevin.
I definitely recommend.
I see 24 concurrent users. I doubt a single one doesn't already have Black Card, but in case, I guess. Funny thing, I pre-ordered the book and it came autographed and I laugh every time.
Yeah, autographing stuff isn't punk, but signing books is cool. Somehow, I'm working in that with that duality. We're talking about people spending money on stuff. Our beloved Razor Cake is having a subscription drive. Isn't that true?
This is true.
I heard
Oh,
that you
look
could
at you.
get 10 issues of the magazine, which comes out every 2 months, for just $17.
$17.
What? I wish there was a website I could go to with a simple, easy to remember URL so that I could get me a subscription to the Razor Cake.
That would be a total steal to get 96 pages delivered to your house every 2 months for 10 bi-monthly installments for only $17.
That's true. I wonder if a Razor Cake, if they had a website that was something simple like razorcake.org, where you could go and you could get you a subscription.
Wait, is it .org because they're a nonprofit organization?
I believe so.
501c3?
Yeah, the only nonprofit punk magazine in America.
Yes, yes.
I
Wow.
bought 6 of them personally this month, so I think you guys could buy one, dear listeners, viewers.
That sounds good, Kayla. Did you buy 6 of them for yourself or did you share them with your friends?
I did not. I bought one for my mom, and then, which, by the way, Mom, you're getting a Razor Cake subscription. Surprise is unveiled. And then 5 to whoever needed them, you know?
Nice.
My sources tell me this is 112 pages.
That's a ton of pages.
That's a lot.
So many pages for $17.
Maybe some excellent columns? I heard that if you pay extra, Daryl will read the magazine to you. As an audiobook.
Following you around, reading it.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to make sure that I did that I didn't do at the last one, especially since all of you are here, we were all supposed to see each other for Todd and Jennifer's wedding, and we did not. So I wanted to wish hearty congratulations to Todd Taylor and Jennifer Frederico on their beautiful union of love.
Yeah.
Pandemics are bullshit and they're scary and they make me sad, and I don't like being sad, and I miss shows. There was like that brief moment of like, oh, I don't have to leave the house. And then about 4 seconds later, I'm just like, I want to see people and I want to be able to watch a band that I can say they're not good. Like, I want that.
I know when Mike was reading, I was like, social distance, keep away from each other. They have their masks on.
Yeah, get your acoustic and go back to your bedroom. You don't have to be live.
Live stream that shit. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Should we call it a night? Say goodbye to our friends?
Yeah.
Wait until next month.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Donna, for putting this together and doing
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah, and stay tuned. If we do this correctly, we'll have one every month.
All right.
That's super cool.
Cool. Thank you,
You
for
guys are
Good
brilliant.
night, Kayla. I love you guys.
Love you guys
Too.
too. Bye.
Take care, friends. Stay safe.